My dad, Robert. He was my hero. He was the anchor of our family. A quiet, hard-working man who was always home for dinner, always fixed things around the house, and always showed up for every single one of my soccer games and band concerts. My parents, Robert and Carol, had been married for 40 years. They were the couple, the definition of lifelong devotion. I'm the oldest of three, married with my own kids now, but I still saw my parents every Sunday for dinner. My dad was consistent, predictable. That predictability was the bedrock of my world. That's why when the truth hit, it didn't just crack the foundation, it pulverized it. It happened on a dull Tuesday afternoon. I was taking a quick lunch break at my desk, scrolling through the news, when I got distracted and clicked on a random story about an online fundraising platform, a GoFundMe page that had gone viral for a particularly heartwarming reason. My fingers were just idling on the search bar. I honestly don't know what made me do it, but I typed in my father's full name, Robert J. Miller. He's a common name, so I expected dozens of results, unrelated people. Maybe an old colleague. But the first result that popped up was a GoFundMe page. The title was bold, heartbreaking. Help Robert recover from his life-changing accident. I clicked it immediately, my heart jumping into my throat. An accident? Life-changing? Why hadn't anyone called me? Was my mother okay? I was already reaching for my phone to call her. I read the text on the page, and the confusion started immediately. The story was about a Robert J. Miller who had been in a severe car accident 2 weeks prior. He was currently in the ICU with massive spinal injuries. They needed money for physical therapy, medical bills, and to keep the family afloat during his long recovery. It was shocking, but the details were wrong. My dad was at home, completely fine. I had just spoken to him last night about coming over to fix a leaky faucet. I scrolled down to the photo section, preparing to dismiss it as a coincidence. It had to be a different Robert J. Miller. And then I saw the main picture. It was my father. Not just a look-alike. It was Robert J. Miller, my dad. Older now, a little gray around the temples, but his eyes, his characteristic gap in his front teeth when he smiled. It was him. He was lying in a hospital bed, tubes coming out of his nose, looking frail and completely unlike the strong man I knew. My hands started shaking so violently, the mouse slipped out of my grip. I forced myself to read the text again, looking for any possible explanation. Maybe it was an old photo, a prank? I scrolled back to the top of the description. It was written by someone named Teresa Miller. The description began, "My husband, Robert, is the most wonderful man and the best father to our 2 children, Sam and Lucy. He's always been our rock. Now, our family needs your help. Husband, Teresa, Sam, and Lucy." I felt a dizzying wave of coldness wash over me. I tried to make sense of the words, but they wouldn't form a cohesive thought. My father was lying in an ICU bed 50 miles away, supposedly injured 2 weeks ago, and the woman who wrote this described him as her husband and the father of their 2 children, children whose names I had never heard. I clicked through the photo gallery, and the lie became a crushing, undeniable reality. There were pictures of Robert J. Miller laughing at a picnic, his arm around a young woman, Teresa, who looked about my age. Pictures of him helping a young boy, Sam, with a bike. Pictures of a beautiful little girl, Lucy, sitting on his lap at Christmas, the tree sparkling behind them. The dates on the photos spanned 12 years. 12 years. The first photo was taken when I was pregnant with my first child. I realized with a sickening lurch that while I was calling my dad a hero and building my world on the stability of his marriage, he was living a complete, thriving, parallel life. My father was a bigamist, a fraud, a monster. I looked at the date of the accident on the page. 2 weeks ago. I thought back. 2 weeks ago, my mother told me Dad was on an emergency business trip upstate, a very important deal that couldn't wait. He'd been gone for 12 days, claiming bad reception in the mountains, only calling occasionally for quick, stressed updates. He wasn't on a business trip. He was fighting for his life in a hospital surrounded by his other family. I immediately printed the entire page. The story, the photos, the comments from Teresa's friends. I needed physical proof. My hands were shaking so hard I had to use my elbow to hit the print button. My brain shifted instantly from shock to cold, protective rage. My mother, my sweet, trusting, 40-year married mother. She had no idea. I didn't call the hospital. I didn't call my mother. I needed to know the scope of this betrayal before I blew up my family's life. I needed to know exactly where he was and who this Teresa was. The GoFundMe page listed a general location, a suburb called Westview, an hour-and-a-half drive from my home. It was the next step in my excavation of the truth. I knew exactly where I was going. I told my husband I had a sudden emergency with a client that required me to drive out of town. He didn't question it, just like my mother didn't question my father's 12-day business trip. We were all so comfortable in the illusion of trust. I gathered the printouts, grabbed my keys, and started driving toward Westview, toward my father's other life, and toward the biggest, most devastating secret I had ever uncovered. The drive to Westview felt surreal. I was operating on pure adrenaline, a cold fury replacing the initial shock. An hour-and-a-half of driving gave me too much time to think, too much time to replay 40 years of family memories. Every vacation, every birthday, every "I love you" from my dad was now tainted. Which family was he thinking about then? Who got the genuine him and who got the exhausted leftovers? Westview was a clean, well-manicured suburb, the kind of place where stable, happy families lived. A stark contrast to the chaos and deception that had brought me there. I used the GoFundMe page comments to narrow down the hospital he was in. A few local names had mentioned getting Robert flowers at St. Jude's. It was a simple, terrifying confirmation. I didn't go to the hospital yet. I went straight to the address listed by one of the anonymous donors. I dropped off dinner for Teresa at their house on Pine Street. I found Pine Street, and then I found the house. A pretty 2-story colonial with a huge oak tree in the front yard. It looked warm, welcoming, and painfully normal. A wooden sign hung by the front door. The Miller family. I parked down the street and just watched. It was late afternoon. A small blonde girl, maybe 6 or 7, was drawing with chalk on the driveway. Lucy, my half-sister. She had my father's eyes, and my heart twisted with the grief that wasn't just about me, but about this innocent child caught in his wicked web. A young boy, Sam, who looked about 10, was shooting hoops in the side yard. And then the front door opened and Teresa stepped out carrying a garbage bag. She was exactly as she looked in the photos. Pretty, tired, but with a fierce determination in her posture. The posture of a woman who was holding her family together during a crisis. I watched her for 10 minutes. She hugged Sam, she knelt to check Lucy's drawing, and then she got into an older minivan, presumably heading to the hospital to sit vigil by my father's bedside. This was his life. Not a fling, not a secret apartment. a full, functioning, decades-long family life. While my mom was home tending her garden and waiting for his business trips, he was here, being the father and husband I thought he was to us. I drove back home, the need to confront my mother first overriding everything else. The rage was still there, but it was now mixed with a terrible, profound sympathy for the woman I knew my father was about to shatter. When I got home, my mother, Carol, was in the kitchen, making a pot of tea. She looked relieved to see me. "Oh, thank heavens, honey. That client emergency kept you late. You look pale." "Mom," I started, putting the stack of GoFundMe printouts on her perfectly clean counter. "I need you to look at this." She frowned, picking up the stack. "What's this? A charity? You know your father usually handles—" She stopped talking abruptly. Her eyes landed on the first page. "Help Robert recover from his life-changing accident." Then she saw the photo. Robert in the hospital bed. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "He's hurt. Why didn't anyone call us? His business trip was a lie. Who took this photo?" She was still grasping for an innocent explanation. I pointed a trembling finger at the description. "Keep reading, Mom." Read who posted it. She read the name Teresa Miller. She read the lines. "My husband Robert is the most wonderful man and the best father to our 2 children, Sam and Lucy." My mother's face went slack. It wasn't a dramatic scream or a theatrical collapse. It was worse. It was a slow, terrifying realization. Her eyes, which had looked at that man with love and trust for 40 years, were now completely empty. "Teresa, husband, Sam and Lucy?" She repeated, the words hollow. This is a cruel joke, Anna. Someone is trying to scam us. This isn't your father's life." "Yes, it is, Mom," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. I put my arm around her, holding her as the reality finally sunk in. It's him. I saw the house. I saw the kids. The accident happened 2 weeks ago. He lied about his trip to protect his other family. My mother didn't cry. She just shook her head slowly, the 40 years of marriage now dissolving into dust. 12 years, she murmured, tracing a line on the paper. 12 years of a secret life. Our daughter's first communion, your wedding, Christmas morning. He was dividing his time. He was a fraud. The anger came next, a deep, furious wave that startled me. My gentle mother slammed her fist on the counter. He chose to put us through this public humiliation for a broken spine. He could have died, and we would have found out through a GoFundMe page. This is unforgivable. The crisis wasn't just emotional. It was immediate and logistical. My father was lying injured in a hospital an hour and a half away, his 2 wives now aware of each other. "What do we do, Mom?" I asked. "Do we call his lawyer? Do we call the hospital? Do we confront Teresa?" My mother took a deep breath, the look in her eyes hardening into steel. 40 years of quiet devotion were replaced by 40 years of quiet strength. "We go to the hospital, Anna. We don't call the police, not yet. We confront him first, and we make sure he knows that the money he accumulated for 40 years is going to his legitimate family. We are going to expose the lie right where he is most vulnerable." The next day, my mother and I drove back to Westview, not as a grieving wife and daughter, but as a united front, ready to face the monster in his lair. The drive to St. Jude's Hospital was silent and tense. My mother was wearing her best suit, the one she usually saved for weddings and important meetings. She looked dignified, controlled, and absolutely terrifying. She wasn't going to confront a husband, she was going to face a criminal. We arrived at the hospital and headed straight to the information desk. My mother gave the receptionist her full legal name. I am Carol Miller. I am Robert J. Miller's wife. Can you tell me his room number? The receptionist, clearly unfamiliar with the family drama, looked up the name and pointed us toward the intensive care unit. As we walked down the long, sterile corridor, the smell of disinfectant and sickness hung in the air. The gravity of the situation hit me. The man who had torn our family apart was fighting for his life, and we were here to deliver the final, fatal blow to his deception. We paused outside the ICU waiting room. My mother turned to me. "Stay calm, Anna. We get the truth from him first, then we wait for her." We pushed open the door to Robert's room. He was exactly as he looked in the photo, pale, hooked up to machines, immobile, but awake. He looked tired and miserable. When he saw my mother and me standing in the doorway, the blood drained from his face. It wasn't the panic of a caught man. It was the utter, crushing realization that his two worlds had just collided at his most vulnerable moment. "See, Carol? Anna? What are you doing here?" His voice was weak, scratchy. "I told you I was upstate. The reception is bad." My mother didn't move from the doorway. She held up the crumpled printout of the GoFundMe page, her hand steady. "The reception must be quite good here, Robert," she said, her voice a low, cold monotone. "Good enough for your other wife, Teresa, to start a fundraising campaign for her family. Funny, isn't it? We found out about your life-changing accident on the internet." My father closed his eyes, a single fat tear rolling down his temple. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. "I am so sorry, Carol," he whispered. "I was going to tell you. After the surgery. I didn't want you to worry." "You didn't want me to worry? Or you didn't want me to find out that you've been living a full, complete life with Teresa and your children, Sam and Lucy, for the last 12 years? My mother took a step forward, the suit making her look like a judge delivering a verdict. "Every vacation, every emergency meeting, every time you said you were working late, you were with them. You gave them your time, your health, your love. What did we get, Robert? We got the hollow, empty shell of a husband and father." I stepped forward, my own hurt overriding my desire for calm. 12 years, Dad. "I had a baby 12 years ago. You were telling me how proud you were, how much you loved our family while starting a new one. Did you ever stop to think what you were doing to Mom? To us?" He opened his eyes, staring up at the ceiling. "It just happened. I met Teresa at a conference. She was young, she needed stability. I was tired of being the anchor. She made me feel alive again. Then came Sam and Lucy. I couldn't leave them. I couldn't leave you. I was trapped." "No, Robert," my mother stated firmly. "You weren't trapped. You were greedy. You chose to be a selfish fraud. Now here is how the truth works." My mother pulled out a piece of paper. "I have already spoken with our lawyer. Since you concealed this marriage and these children for over a decade, and since you have admitted to being medically unable to manage your affairs, I am petitioning the court for full control over all joint marital assets and accounts immediately. The money we saved for your retirement, our home, everything. It will be protected for your legitimate family. You have forfeited your right to any of it." His eyes widened in fear. "Carol, no, I need that money for the hospital, for my recovery." "Teresa's GoFundMe page should cover that, Robert," my mother replied coldly. "You can rely on your new family now." Just then the door opened. It was Teresa. She was carrying a small overnight bag, her face tired but hopeful. She froze instantly when she saw us, two strange women towering over her husband's bed. "Robert, what's going on? Who are these women?" Teresa looked panicked, sensing the immense tension. My mother didn't even turn around. She looked straight at my father and delivered the final crushing line. "Tell her, Robert. Tell your wife who I am. Tell her about the 40 years of marriage she didn't know about." Teresa's bag dropped to the floor with a soft thud. She looked at my mother, then at me, then back at my father, her eyes filling with a mixture of confusion and absolute horror. "Wife? What is she talking about, Robert? Who is this woman?" My father closed his eyes again, unable to face either of us. "Teresa, this is Carol, my wife." The sound Teresa made wasn't a scream. It was a devastating guttural cry of a woman who had just realized her entire world, her family, her marriage, was a beautiful, decade-long fabrication. The air was thick with her sudden, agonizing despair. The silent war had just become a public, messy explosion. Teresa's cry echoed in the sterile silence of the room. It was the sound of a woman's entire life being instantly vaporized. "You're lying," Teresa said, her voice shaking. Her eyes were fixed on Robert. "Robert, this isn't true. He is my husband. He's Sam and Lucy's father. You never told me you were married for 40 years. Robert turned his head away helplessly. "Teresa, please, not now. I'm sick. We can't talk." My mother, Carol, turned to Teresa. There was no hatred on her face, just a weary, cold realism. "My name is Carol Miller," my mother stated. "I have been his wife for 40 years. I saved money for his retirement, worked for our home, and raised our 2 children. I was his wife 12 years ago when he met you. Your marriage, as Robert told you, is a lie. I found this GoFundMe page. That is what exposed him." Teresa covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes overflowing with tears. She looked as much of a victim as my mother, if not more so. She, too, had been pulled into this man's deception. "Sam and Lucy," Teresa whispered. "How am I going to tell them?" "Why would he do this to us?" I interjected. "He did the same thing to us, Teresa." My mother is also paying the price for this lie. He is a textbook narcissist. For 12 years, he financed 2 separate lives, claimed to love 2 separate families, and completely destroyed 2 women. Teresa's gaze darted from me to my father, then back to my mother. A strange bond of shared agony was forming between the 2 of us. Our true enemy in this complex moment wasn't Teresa. She was, like my mother, a casualty of his monumental selfishness. At that moment, Robert, as if suddenly regaining strength, stirred in his hospital bed. "Enough! Get out, both of you, call the nurse, leave here." My mother gave his final gasp of control a cold look. "We are leaving, Robert." But we are not leaving empty-handed. My mother pushed the crumpled GoFundMe printout into Teresa's hand. "I have proof of his entire deception. This man has been cheating on both of us for at least 12 years. We can't help pay his hospital bills, but I can give you the number of a good lawyer. Since you are not legally married to him, you may have rights to compensation. But know this. Robert Miller will not be giving a single dime from his retirement account to his second family. I won't allow it." My mother gave Teresa a chilling look of finality and gripped my arm, pulling me out of the room. As we slowly closed the door, We could hear Robert's pained groans and Teresa's desolate sobs echoing behind us. Leaving the hospital, we left Teresa in the waiting room, confused, medicated, and holding the lawyer's card my mother had given her. Her story was only just beginning. We moved immediately to the next stage. My mother sat in the passenger seat while I drove, and she called her attorney. "The situation is urgent," I heard her say. "Robert Miller is in the hospital, conscious, but immobile. He has just admitted to maintaining 2 simultaneous marriages and 2 families. You need to immediately freeze all joint marital assets and accounts. Otherwise, he might try to name the other woman on them." Our attorney, after processing the shocking news, acted immediately. Robert's accounts were all frozen that afternoon, preventing him from making any move against us. This was the only way to protect my mother's 40 years of savings. This was the beginning of a cold, hard war to protect what was left of my mother's marriage. We would make Robert pay the price for his selfishness, not just emotionally, but financially. The money he had divided between 2 homes for years would now belong to one, ours. As I drove, my mother took a deep breath for the first time. Her eyes were no longer vacant. They were filled with a fierce, determined energy. "No more tears, Anna," she said. "Only business. He will pay the price for his greed, and that price will be the thing he values most, his money and his reputation." My father's 2-week business trip had been exposed in a single hospital confrontation as the greatest farce of his life, and I was the one who had uncovered and detonated the entire scheme. The immediate aftermath of the hospital confrontation was chaos. Robert was kept in the ICU, but not because of his physical injuries. The stress of the double exposure, coupled with the realization that his finances were frozen, caused his blood pressure to spike dangerously. He had gone from a man fighting for his health to a man fighting for his solvency. Our attorney filed the divorce papers the very next morning, citing adultery and emotional distress, and included the GoFundMe page as primary evidence of his deliberate deception and bigamous behavior. The financial battle was swift and brutal. Robert had maintained 2 separate financial lives, but since the marriage to my mother was the legal, original one, every asset acquired during those 40 years was considered marital property. His attempts to transfer funds or sign over assets to Teresa were easily blocked by the freezing order. Robert's only response was to call me, begging, "Anna, please, you have to talk to your mother. Teresa has no money. Her kids have nothing. I can't leave them with nothing. It's not fair to the children." "And what about your children, Dad?" I shot back, utterly devoid of sympathy. "What about the inheritance you stole from my siblings and me for 12 years to fund your double life? You made a choice. You chose to be the anchor for their stability, not ours. You should have thought about fairness before you became a liar." I hung up, deleting his number entirely. The final hammer blow came 2 weeks later. When Robert was stable enough to be transferred out of the ICU, Teresa had vanished. She took her children, closed the GoFundMe page, and moved back to her family, leaving behind only a brief, handwritten note for Robert, slipped under his hospital door. I later learned from my mother's attorney, who was in contact with Teresa's attorney, that Teresa felt completely destroyed. She had genuinely believed she was happily married. She didn't hate my mother or me. She hated Robert for stealing 12 years of her life and deceiving her children. She signed a quick agreement not to contest the divorce, taking only some personal belongings and requesting temporary child support, a request our attorney agreed to, ensuring we could get the divorce finalized faster. The divorce itself was finalized within 5 months. My mother received the house, the primary retirement accounts, and a substantial portion of Robert's assets. He was left with his pension and the debt from his medical bills. His 40-year career as a respected engineer was effectively over, his reputation ruined by the scandal. When Robert was discharged from the hospital, he didn't return to our home. He had nowhere to go. My mother had changed the locks, and the deed was solely in her name. He ended up moving in with an old, bewildered bachelor friend an hour away. The hardest part was managing the truth with my younger siblings and, most importantly, with my own children. We told my siblings the truth, showing them the pages. The pain and fury they felt mirrored mine. Their relationship with Robert was permanently damaged. To my children, we simply explained that Grandpa had been very sick, and sometimes when people are very sick, they make mistakes that destroy trust. It was a partial truth designed to protect them from the monstrous nature of his betrayal. My mother, Carol, emerged from the wreckage a new woman. She sold the big house, which was too full of ghosts and the silence of a 40-year lie. She bought a smaller, sunnier condo near me, and for the first time in her life she started taking classes, painting, pottery. She realized that the stable life Robert provided was also the cage that confined her. She was finally, truly free. As for me, I learned a terrifying lesson. The man who is the most predictable, the most stable, the quietest hero is often the one with the biggest, darkest secret. My trust in people, especially men, was shattered, but my relationship with my mother and my siblings became stronger than ever. The GoFundMe page was eventually taken down, but I still have the printouts. They are a tangible reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of selfishness are hiding in plain sight, and that the biggest heroes are the women who survive their lies.